Another mistake that a lot of people do and like barreling forward with a data governance initiative is that they don't come up with a good strategy, or they spend too long on some sort of charter or plan that is not very pragmatically focused, that doesn't think about more, like what are we actually doing practically, how is this we creating action and activity and outcomes from this, and how are we engaging all of our stakeholders in the process, and how are we making sure that we're playing into our strengths and building on this, all the buy-in and enthusiasm that we need to get this done. So before we do this, I do want to, I know we are not doing a live poll here, but I've given this session several times recently at conferences, and I usually ask these questions, and I think it's helpful for you to hear that I'll ask people, where are you kind of with data governance? And it might be, hey, we can't seem to get things started, or we started data governance, but there was sort of no adoption, and we've lost all momentum. Or maybe there is adoption by a small group, but we cannot build buy-in to expand to more of the organization. Or there's adoption for some best practices, like maybe you've got your data systems inventoried, or you've got some policy and security things happening, but you really don't have much going on beyond that in literacy or quality or other things. Or maybe you have some competing data governance initiatives within the organization. You can't really get aligned on that, and that's causing lack of momentum or moving forward. Or maybe everything is going great, and you actually have a really good data governance program. You haven't seemed to run into too many barriers, or you've been able to go over them, and you're asking yourself why you're even at this session. So when I present this to a group, the most common set of answers fall in this like 2 and 3 and 4 area, right? And most people tend to be closer to 2 or 3, sort of the failure to launch kind of situation, or they got started and really lost momentum because of buying. One other thing I want to say before I get too far into this session is that I don't want to imply in how important it is to build buy-in that means that there is an immense amount of effort and labor that you need from all of your stakeholders. That one of the biggest problems that people have with building buy-in is that they create a plan or a strategy for implementing data governance that requires too much effort from their stakeholders. So one of the first things you can do is to think about a plan that reduces the ask on your people, or figures out how to say, like, how do we make sure that we are being gentle with the time of the people that we're engaged with here, and only ask for their time when it's needed, and when they're most likely to give that, and where they feel the most reward from that activity. So this presentation is not about convincing people to do a bunch of work for you. It's more like convincing people that there is actually not a whole lot of work that needs to be done, and there's really good outcomes, and you'd like to show them how they can help in small ways to get large outcomes for you. So, all right. So if you're putting together a plan, again, we recommend creating a roadmap. This is something that is that ideally you could do in a matter of weeks. Kind of time box this into something that you do in 1 to 2 months with a bit of time. It doesn't have to be a perfect document, but the idea here is that you want to say, like, answer some key questions around what you're trying to do, and then this document will guide your conversations with these stakeholders to help you build buy-in. Right? Because one of the biggest mistakes you can make across all the people we're going to talk about is not be able to answer their primary question of, like, why are we doing this, and why do you need me, and why is this important, and why is this more important than these other things I have to do. So you got to be able to make the case for it, and so having a plan that outlines that can be really helpful. As I mentioned before, there is a whole 60-minute presentation on creating the roadmap. We're going to just scrape the surface of it here. So what is in the roadmap at the high level? There is a section where you just sort of list, like, what are these key goals of your data governance initiative? Why are you doing data governance? Secondly, there's an area where you list the different kind of data governance or data intelligence best practices that you plan to implement. And it can be an aspirational list if you want, but it's going to be, it should be prioritized in the sense that you're saying we're doing these first and these second and these third, right? But mainly you want to make sure that you're focusing on the ones that you are doing. And if there is interest within your organization or a need or demand within your organization for some like a data quality initiative, but you're not doing that first, I would be sure to list it here and show that that's something that is going to come later, right, from a prioritization standpoint. So you want to have a little schedule for implementation saying this is how we are implementing it. We're doing these things first and these things second and these things third. There is a lot that we talk about in this best practice session for building a roadmap around how you can iterate. You can iterate on content, meaning, hey, you know, we're going to focus on a report inventory and then a business glossary and a data system inventory, and then we're going to do lineage, and then we're going to, you could kind of iterate that way. You can iterate organizationally. You say, hey, we're going to focus on one key area. We're going to start with our human resources group or with our sales group or whatever, and do and maybe do a broad set of best practices, but in that small group. Or maybe you want to focus on some technology first, like, oh, we're going to deal with like this particular data warehouse or this particular reporting tool, and kind of get these governance practices and processes working there, and then roll that out. Or some combination where you're iterating around both scope and organization. So, you know, however you want to do that. So you've identified the different best practices. You have a schedule for that implementation, and then a summary of how you want to roll those out. The other part here is you want to talk a little bit about what your current state is. Like, this is what we're doing now. This is the type of processes that exist. This is where people have reported challenges or barriers or issues with the effective use of data. Or this is where people are seeing success, but maybe it's not adopted broadly in the organization. And that current state assessment is useful for, you know, saying, hey, we're doing this, and it's because we're trying, you know, to tie those to those kind of issues, right, and the goals as well. It's also then at a high level, it's important to say, right, we've got this plan, we're going to do this first and the second, and here is sort of the immediate thing that we're going to do to pilot this, right? And this is more of a way to trick yourself into saying we're not just creating some charter that we never do anything. Like, the purpose of this roadmap is to actually apply these best practices to achieve these key goals. So having sort of an immediate pilot implementation of something that, you know, it depends obviously on what your goals are and how you're iterating, but the most common thing we see is, hey, we're going to work on, you know, like these sets of reports or this particular group or this particular rollout, and sort of demonstrate that this is something that works well, that then can grow from that.